What's up, operators, and welcome back to the channel. If you've ever heard this sound in the middle of a firefight, you know you're about to have a bad day. Today we're talking about one of the most basic skills in Tactical Assault VR, but it's also one of the easiest ways to get yourself killed if you don't do it right, and that's reloading. Everybody knows how to put a new magazine into a gun, but knowing when to reload and which reload method to use can make a huge difference in your gameplay. So let's go over the 3 main reload styles you'll use in TAVR, along with some ammunition management tips that every player should know. Before we even get into the reloads themselves, let's talk about magazine management. Unlike a lot of shooters out there, Tactical Assault VR doesn't just magically tell you how many rounds are left in your magazine. Instead, what the game does is while holding a magazine, you can press either the X or the A button on your controller to perform an ammo check. The controller will vibrate to tell you roughly how much ammunition is left. 4 vibrations means the magazine is full, 3 vibrations means roughly 75% full, 2 vibrations means about half full, and 1 vibration means about 25% remaining. If you have 0 vibrations, congratulations, you've got an empty magazine in your hand, champ. This is a great habit to build, especially after a tactical reload or when you're sorting through partially loaded magazines during a mission. Another thing a lot of newer players don't realize is that these magazines can actually be refilled. If you come across an ammunition box, simply insert your magazine into the box and it'll be replenished back to full capacity. This is incredibly useful during longer operations because it allows you to refill these partially loaded or empty magazines and have them fully ready to go. If you've got the time and access to an ammo box, there's no reason not to top off your magazines before moving on. This is part of why magazine retention is so important, and that's something we'll touch on a bit later in the video. When it's time to reload, don't leave your weapon hanging way out in front of you. Instead, bring the weapon into your workspace. Your workspace is the area right in front of your face and right above your chest, where you can clearly see the magazine well, controls, and your hands, while keeping everything in your peripheral vision. By bringing the weapon closer, you're reducing unnecessary movement and making it easier to line up magazines and check your weapon more consistently. Now let's discuss the next step, sending the bolt home. Let's start with cocking the weapon. Most players first learn this method because it's simple and it works on nearly every weapon. The advantage is consistency. If you build the habit of always grabbing the charging handle, you're performing the same action regardless of the rifle you're using, usually. Whether using an M4, HK416, AK variant, or another weapon, the process usually feels familiar. Another advantage is positive confirmation. You physically manipulate the weapon and can clearly see the bolt moving forward. The downside, however, is movement. You have to take away your support hand from where it would normally be and reach for the charging handle. This adds time and extra motion, considering the charging handle is usually at the very rear of the gun. In a close fight, though, even a small amount of extra movements can slow down your return to target and mess up your sight picture. Now let's talk about the bolt release. The base advantage is efficiency. Once the magazine is seated, your support hand is already near the controls. Instead of reaching all the way up to the charging handle, you simply smack the side and activate the bolt release and get right back on target. The result is a smoother and often faster reload. Another advantage is that your weapon stays closer to your workspace throughout the reload. The disadvantages, though, are that not every weapon has a bolt release that's as accessible or intuitive as an AR-style rifle. Players who constantly switch weapon systems may find themselves hunting for controls instead of relying on muscle memory. But some players also prefer larger, more deliberate movements during reloads because they're easier to perform consistently under stress, searching for a bolt release or searching for a cocking handle. Let's start with the emergency reload. This reload nobody wants to do. Engaging targets, everything is going great, and then suddenly, your weapon is empty. Now you're forced to get a fresh magazine into the gun before you continue fighting. The advantage of emergency reload is that it's pretty straightforward. Your magazine is empty, so you replace it and get back into the fight. The downside, you're doing it because you've already run out of ammo. This means you're most vulnerable because enemies are probably still shooting at you because you didn't expect to be out. If you're constantly performing your emergency reload, it might be a sign that you were waiting way too long to reload and it's causing you to get killed. Next up is the tactical reload. This is what you'll probably use most often. Let's say you just clear a room, eliminate a few threats, and get a few seconds before moving forward. Instead of keeping the partially loaded magazine of the weapon, you swap it out for a fresh one. The biggest advantage here is simple. You start the next engagement with a full magazine. You don't have to wonder if you've got 5 rounds left or 25 rounds left. You know exactly what you're working with. The disadvantage, though, is that the magazine keep doing tactical reloads throughout the mission, you can end up with a bunch of partially loaded magazines and have zero idea which one is which unless you do the ammo checks. But that's where these come in handy anyhow. That brings us to the retention reload is basically a tactical reload, except you're making an effort to keep that partially loaded magazine for later use, instead of dropping it or forgetting about it. You store it and save those rounds in your dump pouch. The biggest advantage is ammunition management. If you're playing a long mission, a hardcore scenario, or anything where ammo is limited, those extra rounds can make all the difference. The downside though is speed. A retention reload requires more movement and more coordination. In a safe environment, this isn't a problem. In the middle of a gunfight, though, it can become a problem very quickly and can be lethal. Now, here's where retention reloads become really valuable, though, and it's something a lot of new players completely skim over. Remember those ammo boxes we talked about earlier in the video? Every partially loaded magazine and empty one you save can be refilled later at an ammo box. This means a magazine with only a few rounds left isn't useless. It's still a magazine that can eventually be topped back off to full capacity. A lot of newer players will perform a tactical reload, leave magazines laying around, or simply stop paying attention to them altogether. Experienced players tend to retain those magazines because they know they have the opportunity to refill it later. Think about it. If you save 5 partially loaded magazines throughout a mission, that's potentially 5 full magazines you get back once you reach an ammo box. So retention reloads are much slower. They can become more valuable during longer missions where resource management matters just as much as your marksmanship. So, which reload is the best? Honestly, none of them. They're just tools. If your weapon runs dry, you're doing an emergency reload. If you've got a safe moment before the next engagement, a tactical reload makes sense. If ammo conservation is important, use a retention reload. The trick isn't mastering one reload style. The trick is knowing when to use each one and keeping these tools in your tool belt. One thing I see a lot of players do all the time is reloading immediately after every engagement. You don't always need to do this. Take a second, assess the situation, check your magazines, communicate with your team, and then decide whether or not a reload is actually necessary. A good reload isn't just fast, it's done at the exact right time and keeping your resources in mind. Those are the basics of reloading in Tactical Assault VR. If you got a preferred reload method, let me know down in the comments. And if you've got any other tips for magazine management, ammo conservation, or reload techniques, share those too. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next mission.